من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول في الكتاب العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتون إلا وأنتم مسلمون. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. My dear brothers and sisters, I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is his last and final messenger. So obviously this week, some people will come in and say it was a victorious week with the midterm elections. There was some records or some first-timers, 2 Muslim sisters, first time to be elected in Congress, one being a hijabi. But with that being said, dear brothers and sisters, this is not the end, it is just the beginning. Because our work is to make sure we hold the people we elect to be accountable, to serve us in a just manner. That is when we become victorious. The Prophet ﷺ said, help your brother where he is an oppressor or he is an oppressed one. And people ask the Prophet ﷺ, we understand how to help the oppressed one. But how do you help the oppressor? It's by preventing him from oppressing others. And this, dear brothers and sisters, we have to do. Because we know that one of the 7 people who will be shaded from Allah's throne on the Day of Judgment when there will be no other shade is a just ruler. It is a just ruler. And to go over the 7 really quickly, it's a just ruler, a young man who grew up in the worship of Allah, a man whose attachment is to the masjid, 2 brothers who love each other for the sake of Allah, a man who refuses the call of woman for the fear of Allah, a man who gives in charity where his left hand does not know what his right hand has given, and a man who is all alone, who sheds tears because he fears Allah. But today, dear brothers and sisters, I want to focus on that first one, a just ruler. And some of us, dear brothers and sisters, might say, how does that apply to me? I don't plan to be a ruler. I'm not running for office. But, dear brothers and sisters, people do have rights over us. Every single one of us has somebody who has rights over them. And are we being just to them? The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah does not bless a people among whom a weak man is not given his rights. Our children have rights over us. Our parents have rights over us. Our neighbors have rights over us. The weak, the poor have rights over us. Dear brothers and sisters, even the people that we manage, if you're a board member in the community, the people you serve have rights over you. So people have rights over every single one of us. And are we giving them their right? Are we treating them with justice? Are we being unjust the way we deal with people? Umar radiallahu anhu embodied this. He embodied this, that even non-Muslims see him as a man of justice. Michael Hart wrote in his book that this is a non-Muslim, who said he was one of the top 100 people, influential people in history. He was ranked at 52. But we know he was ranked a lot higher, just right behind Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. But we see this, dear brothers and sisters. We see a person who went from injustice to justice. He lived a life of injustice before he became Muslim. And after he became Muslim, he lived a life of justice. To the point when he was a Khalifa, he feared the animal will testify against him on the Day of Judgment. He feared the donkey in Iraq will testify against him. The camel that was overburdened will testify against him. This is a man who lived in justice. During his rule, the 18th year of Hijrah, a famine hit Medina, hit the Muslim world. And 60,000 people fled to Medina, refugees. And people were deprived of your basic essentials in a time of famine, similar to what's going on in Yemen right now. But what did he do? He didn't sit there in a palace, in a castle, and say, you know what, we need to help these people while eating steaks and drinking water. No. First and foremost, Umar radiallahu anhu didn't live in the palace. If somebody came there, we didn't know him from the common man. But Amir al-Mu'mineen, what he would do was deprive himself. If he knew the people didn't have meat, he deprived himself from meat. If he knew the people didn't have butter, he deprived himself from butter or oil. Basic essentials. To the point that they said that he started changing color. That the people thought that he might die during the famine. But he even took it a step further, that even his family, he raised them in a way that, hey, his son had a watermelon, bought a watermelon one time. And he chased his son, and he grabbed the watermelon. And he said, we cannot be eating this. The son of Amir al-Mu'mineen cannot be eating this if the people are not eating this. He would deprive himself until the people can eat what he was given. And he said this, dear brothers and sisters, something we should abide by, the people who are in positions of leadership. And all of us are in a position of leadership some way or another. He said, how can I consider myself a shepherd if I am not struck with what my flock is inflicted with? If I can't feel what my flock is feeling, then how can I be a shepherd? We have to do that, dear brothers and sisters. We have to live the way he lived, that justice he served. And he didn't only serve it to Muslims. He served it to non-Muslims as well. One time, the son of Amr ibn al-As was racing. He was a governor of a region, was racing a Christian man. The son was racing a Christian man. And the Christian man, it was a Coptic Christian, won the race. So afterwards, the son of Amr ibn al-As was mad that he lost. He goes up and he slaps the guy. He hits the guy and said, I'm a son of a noble man. You know, that's a sense of like a kind of almost being a little arrogant there. And this Christian man knows that he is being ruled, because he's being ruled, he's living under Umar's rule. I'm being ruled by a just man. And he goes and complains. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is a man who's expanding the Muslim world, who's governing the Muslim world. But he made time for this. He didn't say, you know what, just go deal with this yourself. You just got hit by it. So what? Suck it up. No, he didn't say that. He called Amr ibn al-As and his son. And he verified the story. And once it was verified, he gave the Christian man a whip and said, hit the man who inflicted you with this, and hit his father. And he said, okay, I understand hitting the man. Why his father? He said, because he hit you in his name. He hit you in his name. This is the type of justice Umar did. We know when Jerusalem was opened, there was no violence. They just gave him the keys to the city. And I was there this summer, and I got to pray Dhuhr prayer in Masjid Umar. It's still there to this day. And why is there Masjid Umar over there in the old city? Because they told him, come pray in the church. The non-Muslims told him, come pray in the church. And he said, no, I won't. Not because it's a fiqh issue or there's anything wrong with praying in the church. No. Because he was scared that if he prayed in the church, Muslims will come and convert that church to a masjid. And he didn't want that. It's their place of worship. So he goes and it's about maybe 20 feet, maybe the span of this room from the church to the masjid. About 30, 40 feet. And the masjid is still there, and they built a masjid where he prayed. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Umar ibn al-Khattab. He one time had a disagreement with Ubay ibn Ka'b. A disagreement. And this is why he was Amir. And he brought somebody to judge between them. Zayd ibn Thabit. A judge that he put during his ruling while he was Amir. And Zayd ibn Thabit said, well, you know what? We won't inconvenience you, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. We'll come to your house. He's like, no, don't come to my house. We'll go to your house on neutral ground. I don't want any source of biasness between us. They go to Zayd's house, and Zayd offers him the seat like the head of the table. You know, where somebody, you know, the head of the household will sit like at your dinner table or something. So they had a place where the head of the household will sit. And Umar again declined and said, no, do not show favoritism towards me. So then he starts a proceeding and said, this proceeding is between the judgment of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Ubay ibn Ka'b. And right there, Umar stops it. He stops the proceeding and said, you know what, we're going to find another judge. Why is that? He said, you led with Amir al-Mu'mineen. At this point, between the judge of two people, I'm just Umar ibn Khattab. You're showing favoritism towards me, and I will not have that. This is a person where the favoritism was towards him, and he declined it. Why? Because he was just. He was being just. And we see this through the people, through his history. The people he ruled over felt that. Rabi' ibn Amr. Most of us won't know this Sahabi. Never heard of him until this point in history. Now you see the Persians, about 100 strong came, 100,000 strong came to attack the Muslims. Umar ibn Khattab wanted to go and confront them. But Amr ibn al-As said, no, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you should stay in Medina. Stay here in case something happens. So he said, I have somebody else that we can send. Sa'd ibn Waqqas. So he sent Sa'd ibn Waqqas and 30,000 Muslims. 30,000 Muslims to go and confront 100,000 Persians. Now Rustum, who was the leader, he was the second in command of the Persians. The Persians were the superpower of that time, that era. And he was the second in command. And he says, he goes and sends, bring me somebody to speak on your behalf. So Sa'd ibn Waqqas sent Rabi'. He sent him, and Rabi' was just most of his life he was a slave from Eritrea. And he went there, and from Abyssinia, from Abyssinia. He was a slave most of his life. And he went on his mule to meet this guy, the second in command of the Persian army, the Persian Empire. And when he gets to this big, lavish tent with silks and everything, they try to impress them. The soldiers say, you know what, get off your mule. He said, no. You asked me to come to you. I will not, conform to your conditions. You conform to mine. So Rustam tells him, just let him come in. So he comes in with this mule into the tent. He finds a big pillow. He puts his spear through it and ties the mule to this pillow. Then they usher him to come sit there. There's this big, lavish pillow. He takes his sword and he moves that pillow out of the way and sits on the floor. And everybody's looking and laughing and like, who is this guy? And he goes and says, I will not, I prefer sitting on the ground, and I will not be mesmerized by your dunya, your worldly stuff. And he just sat on the floor. Now Rustam said, why did you guys come here? And this is where Rabi' comes in and tells him what the true message of Islam is, or what they're trying to spread. Allah sent us to remove whoever He wishes from the servitude of man, and instead the servitude of the Lord of man, which is Allah, and from the unjust nature of other religions to the justice of Islam, to the justice of Islam. From the tight confinement of this dunya to the vast life of the hereafter. The main point there, brothers and sisters, is Islam was to bring justice to people. And He was trying to bring justice to these people. Back then, the rulers didn't serve the community they served. Instead, they used the community to serve them. And Islam was going to change that. They were going to change that. And we all know how the story continues, and for time's sake, I'm not going to go into that, but I want to focus on this justice. We see that with the Prophet ﷺ. We see that when in his talks, and no Arab man is better than a non-Arab man. No white man is better than a black man. No black man is better than a white man. We see this. And they embodied this. And there's stories after stories after stories. And we say, how can we do this? We're not prophets. We're not the Sahaba. We weren't around the Prophet. How do we embody justice, dear brothers and sisters? We know we're not them. But we can still emulate them in their actions. We might not have a position in leadership where we're telling people, to be just, but within our families. The people that we elect, if they treat us unjustly, why? It's because they're coming from an unjust society. They're coming from an unjust society. They're coming from us. This year alone, I think over 100 Muslim people ran for office. Now, if we lived a life of justice, treated our neighbors justly, our family justly, our parents, our kids, the weak, the poor, the traveler, then guess what? From among us, we'll be electing someone who's just. If we treat the non-Muslims like Umar ibn Khattab, if we treat them justly, they might move up and start treating us justly. So we just have to be that, from college kids to your coworkers, to people you talk to people here. I know there's a group of students from Nova, non-Muslims, that came here today to attend this khutbah. How are we going to be treating them when they go back to campus? And we say, well, you know what, we're not them. But look at the people in history. Malcolm X, he stood up for justice. He was just a common man. Nobody would know him, but he stood up for justice and moved up the ranks. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King. These people weren't born into royalty, weren't born into power. No. They stood up for something. They stood up for justice. Muhammad Ali stood up for justice. When they asked him, how would you like to be remembered? What did he say? As a black man who won the heavyweight title, who was humorous and who never looked down at anyone who looked up to him. A man who stood for freedom and justice and equality. This is how he wanted to be remembered. Colin Kaepernick, for those who don't know, a former NFL quarterback. At the height of his career, he stood up for justice. Well, actually, maybe knelt for justice. He took a knee. Why? Because of the injustices, the inequalities that were happening in society. And he was willing to forego all the NFL contracts and the millions of dollars that he can receive. Just why? Because he felt there was something more important. There was something more important. So, dear brothers and sisters, I say that we all have to take this opportunity to stand for justice. Regardless of who we are, what positions we have in society, treat the people that we're surrounded to with justice. Because we do not know when we will take our last breath. You know, in my community, I live closer to Adams. I grew up here near Al-Hijrah, but live closer to Adams now. Between September and October, I would say we've had over a dozen janazas. And the dozen janazas aren't like someone who's, mashallah, well, he's old, he's lived his life, he's 70, he's 80, he's 90 years old. No. As young as 3 years old, and as old as in 60s and 70s. And everything in between. A kid a couple weeks ago, 7 years old, had a rare disease, passed away. My daughter's third-year-old teacher, her son was found dead in a school bus at the age of 3 or 4. My cousin's coworker, 39 years old, just recently got married, had 2 kids, was found dead in his room. So dear brothers and sisters, death will not evade us. So how are we living our life? الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. He created death and life to test you, which of you is in best in deeds, and He's exalted in might and forgiving. Which one of us is the best of deeds? This is how we're going to live our life, dear brothers and sisters. This is how we should be living our life. I talk about death a lot because I want us to focus on how we are living our life. Are we being unfair? Small things. Small, simple things. You know, I know this one sister who has a brother who's handicapped. And she has the handicap sticker because of her brother. She can park in a handicap spot. And sometimes you'll see that there's no parking. You'll be like, why don't you just park there at the handicap spot when she comes to the office? She said, no. My brother's not with me. That's being unjust. That's not being fair. But how many people like us would do that? Or said, you know what, I can take advantage of that. I can take advantage of like that, I can work the system. Dear brothers and sisters, we have to live like the Sahaba did, like the Prophet ﷺ did, and be just in every single thing we do. The smallest thing. The smallest thing. And ask Allah to make us among the people who are just. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم. Alhamdulillah wa salatu salam ala Rasulullah amma ba'd. Malcolm X said, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. So it's time for us to stand up for justice. For the people who came in late, the khutbah is focusing on justice today. We talked about some of the things that happened on Tuesday, the people who are elected, but we need to hold them accountable to start serving us in a way that is just to all of society, to not discriminate among us. We talked a little bit about death and how we will be living our life. And now I want to talk about how we can implement this into our life. So recently, I came back in September. I got to travel to Turkey. Now we're doing this bike challenge for Islamic Relief, where we were going to Turkey to raise awareness for wells, to build wells in Africa, in Chad and Niger and Malawi and Somalia. And so there was about 40 of us who were going to bike and trek over 200 kilometers while we were there. And it was tough because nobody was a professional biker. I haven't been on a bike for a few years. But you know, we got up and we said, we're going to do this regardless. The hardships that they're going through are a lot more than the hardships we'll be going through. And we did it for a purpose. We did it for a particular purpose. But one of the things during that trip was a history lesson. So it was also the history lesson of the rise of the Ottoman Empire. So that's why we did it in Turkey as well. You know, there was a cause and there was a learning while we were traveling. So we learned about the good and the bad in the Muslim history. You know, there were some good things and bad things. And one of the big things right now, because some of the people who were coming from the 40 people were from the US, from UK, from Scotland, from Spain, from Italy. And we learned about, you know, the in thing in UK was this show on Netflix called Resurrection Ertugrul. It talks about the rise of the Ottoman Empire. And it's a show with like, I think 500 plus episodes. You know, not everything is facts, but it just basically talks about the history of how the Ottomans established their empire. We learned about Muhammad al-Fatah, Ayyub al-Ansari, the Sahabi who went to battle at the age of like 80 plus. But we also learned about Suleiman the Magnificent. He was probably the peak of the Ottoman Empire. And during his reign, they said that he couldn't find people to give sadaqah to. He couldn't find people to give charity to because of him being this ruler. He said, if you treat the people fairly, they'll treat you fairly. You didn't have to fear being overtaken or somebody, you know, trying to dethrone you. But one of the things was interesting when we did the tours is we went to these like town center kind of places where they had a masjid, a place of living quarters, some kitchens, some shops. And they said these were established by Suleiman. And what they were for the travelers. So travelers can come And what? They can rest, they can eat, they can sleep, they can pray, they can feel safe. And He built them all the way to where? Mecca. What He would do is He built them far apart to where a traveler can travel a day during the day and rest there at night. And a traveler can stay there for 3 days free. It wasn't a money-making business. It was He was giving the rights of the traveler so they can perform their duty and perform Hajj. So they'd go from one location to another under the safety of daylight and were comfortable in their resting spots. And subhanAllah, the people of Turkey still kind of implemented that hospitality, that treating the people, the travelers, with kindness. You see, we were biking, like I was said, right? And one of the days, I think this was the third day, there was a lot of hills. We were going up and down hills. And the people who were like the organizers of the group, the lead car was looking, let's find a place for them to stop so they can have lunch. So they stopped by this fruit stand. And they said, you know what, there's no maybe bathrooms here and stuff like that. There's just an old couple. And they kept on going. But subhanAllah, Allah will give the risk regardless. And we ended up, the first biker just stopped there. He saw this fruit stand, he just parked his bike there. And next thing you know, all 40 bikers were there. When the car came back around, after they found the spot, they said, subhanAllah, these people are still here. These people ended up stopping here. We said this stop wouldn't be good, but subhanAllah, they stopped there. But it was the old couple that was there. It's a husband and a wife. And they walked around, and they were insisting people to eat fruit. Not to make money. No. They saw the tired traveler, and they wanted to give them out of their kindness of their heart. They insisted not to take money. We had to force them to take money. And this old lady was cutting up pears and apples, and she'd force them in your mouth. That was the kindness that they have. So from that trip, I had some action items. I took 5 lessons from that trip, and I want to quickly go over them with you. The first one, dear brothers and sisters, is on the first day, you know, I was with Islamic Relief, so I was always in the back of the pack. I was filming, I was taking some pictures, so the group left without me. And I started about 30 minutes behind everybody. So I get on my bike, I start pedaling, right? I said, you know what, I'm going to catch up. But I looked down, I saw my tire flat. I was like, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to keep on going. If I stop now, if I slow down to pump it up, I'm never going to catch up. I eventually got a flat tire and had to wait 45 minutes for the truck to come and fix my tire. And the lesson I take from that, dear brothers and sisters, if I just slow down a little, I could have moved forward faster with a pump tire. And the lesson I take from that, dear brothers and sisters, sometimes in our life, we're moving forward way too fast that we don't get to do the things that we really want to do, the things that we need to do so we can get to Jannah. We want to be better fathers. We want to be better mothers. We want to be better kids, better students, better Muslims. But we just don't have that time. We don't have that time. We keep saying, you know what, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. You know, inshallah, maybe on the weekends I can do this, and you don't. I want to be a better student. I want to start learning, going to these halaqas, come to the masjid more. I just don't have time. If we slow down in our life and make those things that should be important on our list a priority, then we will be moving forward. And where's that moving forward? Getting closer to Jannah. So slow down in your life so we can move forward. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2. It's going to sound like it contradicts lesson number 1, but you'll understand when I get there. Lesson number 2 is don't stop. Don't stop. And what do I mean by that, dear brothers and sisters? The second day was all hills. I felt like Turkey was one big mountain. We were climbing. It was a 3,000-foot climb. And some of the people would stop halfway up the hill and say, you know, Dawood, stop real quick. Let's take a rest. I was like, I can't stop. If I stop, I'll never start pedaling again. It'll be really, really hard. So I said, I'll meet you at the top. So I kept on pedaling. And the lesson I take from that, I know it contradicts, but the reason I'm saying that, dear brothers and sisters, sometimes we go through rough points in our life. We start treating people unjustly. We start reacting because people are treating us unjustly, bullying us, or whatever it may be. And what do we do first? We stop praying. We stop fasting. We start worshiping Allah. I'm not saying people they leave Islam, no. But they say, you know what, Allah is maybe not answering my prayers right now. Let me just take a break for a little bit. Dear brothers and sisters, if you stop, like stopping on a hill on a bike, it'll be really, really hard to reboot and move forward. So do not stop. Even if you're going through a rough time, a rough patch in your life, in the wrong place, in the wrong relationship, whatever it may be, keep on moving. Do not turn your back on Allah. And Allah will not turn His back on you. So that's lesson number 2. Do not stop. Regardless. Number 3, respect your elders. It's a very simple one. We're 40 bikers. The oldest was 52. The youngest was 17. Guess who finished at the top of the pack? It wasn't a race, but somehow finished on the top of the pack. The 52-year-old, the 45-year-old, the 40-year-old. The teenagers, the college kids were somewhere in the middle, sometimes in the back. Dear brothers and sisters, we have to respect our elders. Everybody in here knows somebody who's older than them. Learn from them. They have an abundance of history that's packed up right here, and we can learn from them instead of saying, you know what, this guy's a fob, this guy wasn't here, I don't want to learn from him. He doesn't understand what I'm going through. Trust me, dear brothers and sisters, they understand what you're going through. They might not know the pop cultures or the references, but they understand growing up in a society that might treat them unjustly. It's not different in the so-called Muslim world. It's not different here. Lesson number 4, I'm going to go the last through quickly, is never leave anyone behind. We were traveling as a group, 40 bikers, different speeds, but there was always somebody in the back that would not let anybody pass him. There was this guy, Amran, who didn't even work for Islamic Relief, a volunteer. SubhanAllah, the kindness of his heart, that if he saw somebody broken down on the side of the road, he would give them his bike, and he said, continue, I'll wait till the bike gets fixed. There was a guy behind him who would stop and wait and leave nobody behind him. Dear brothers and sisters, some of us, like I said earlier, might go through some hardships. Don't leave your brother behind. If you see your brother not coming to the masjid as often as he used to be, call him up. A coworker who says, you know what, I'm really busy, I have a meeting, I can't go to Jum'ah, tell him, hey, look, just take a break. Let's make this a priority. Never leave your brother or sister behind. And the last lesson, dear brothers and sisters, so I'll try to yell it really loud, is make that difference by pleasing your Lord. Make that difference by pleasing your Lord. And how do we do that, dear brothers and sisters? The reason we were there was for what? Biking for charity. We were biking for charity. We were helping those who were inflicted, those who didn't have water. And subhanAllah, you know the goal for the U.S. group was only $20,000. It was only $20,000. But those guys knew the necessity. They knew what they were working for. They didn't say, you know what, I want to make the minimum. They hit the $20,000 before the trip even started. Then we moved it to 40. They hit the 40. They moved it to 60. They hit the 60. They moved it to 80. They got to 80. They eventually raised, even while they were there, $110,000, mashallah. Why? Because they knew the benefit of that. Dear brothers and sisters, we cannot stop doing good. We have to always be just to those who are in need. They have rights over us, so we have to help them. It's not just a duty that we do, that it's just a habit. No. Everywhere you see prayer in the Quran, what do you see next to it? Zakah, sadaqah, giving, sacrifice. You see that. So dear brothers and sisters, we have to do that. We have to do that. We have to be fair in our charity, in our giving. And today I'm going to give you that opportunity. Why? Because Al-Hijrah is starting to build a playground. Oh, but they have a playground. This playground was a playground I used to play with. I must be dating myself here because it sounds a lot older. But this playground was built in the 90s. In the 90s. It's unsafe for children. Oh, well, you know what? There's some people who are hungry. Yes, we help those in charities. But building that playground is important. And why is that important, dear brothers and sisters? It's just a playground. We can go to another park. I'm sure you're telling all this stuff right now. Why are we going to spend $25,000 to $30,000 to build a playground? Because it's the next generation. How many times do you hear the next generation thing? But it's true. It ties the children to the masjid. These basketball rims right here, it's not the best basketball court you'll play with. I'm sure you can go in a 5-mile radius and find other basketball courts. But now the kids are here playing basketball. The younger kids are here playing on the playground. It ties their hearts to the masjid, so while they're playing, you can come, pray your sunnah or whatever. But now they said, you know what? They associate the masjid with fun. They associate the masjid with fun. So then they will come. That's why I started because of that. When Al-Hijrah was here, there was a brother Nader, the youth director there, used to take us and play basketball every Saturday morning. It tied my heart to the masjid. Come pray Fajr, let's go play basketball. So we have that same opportunity here, brothers and sisters, to help today. Don't take it for it's just a playground. It's just a playground. So after Salah, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity. And it's not going to take much. I'm not looking for somebody to pay for the whole thing. I want everybody to get the ajr. And all we have to do, $25 to $50. You can pay more. But if everybody in this room, I did the numbers, if everybody paid $25 to $50, they will have that playground up in 5 weeks. In 5 weeks. So ask Allah to make us among the people who are just. Ask Allah to make us among the people who are just. Ask Allah to make us among the people who treat each other fairly. Ask Allah to unite our hearts. Ask Allah to unite our hearts. Ask Allah to make us among the people of Jannah. Ask Allah to make us among the people of Jannah. Ask Allah to make us patient. Ask Allah to make us among the people who are saved from the hellfire. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. أقم الصلاة.